what sticks out in your mind the most about what happened that evening at the library?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, looking back on it now, I mean, it really does stand out as really the only, significant problem I've ever had, since transitioning and using, a public restroom. I mean, you hear so many negative stories in the press about things like that happening that, it's always in the back of my mind, whenever I use a public restroom. But I'd been very thankful that, nothing like that had ever happened. And so, as I mentioned before, it was just really shocking to have practically every transphobic trope under the sun thrown at me in the span of about 30 seconds.
Do you feel that Officer Weaver deserved to be fired?
I mean, is that what actually happened?
Yes.
Oh wow. See, I didn't even I didn't even realize that. That was certainly not my goal. I mean, I said in the initial Fox interview that I didn't want anybody to get fired. I just wanted everybody to be trained and to understand better and to understand better what's going on because, this is how we learn, to interact with our neighbors here.
And I realize the law, especially in DeKalb County, is firmly on your side. Firmly on your side. You make a very good point there. There's the ordinance. The library has a policy that you can use whichever restroom aligns with your gender identity. There's no state law against this. But explain for people why your rights, your needs, your desire to be accepted, validated, etc. Why does that override the maternal instincts of a woman or the comfort of a natal woman who wants private spaces?
Well, I mean, you're basically asking me, I mean, that question, and maybe you don't mean it to sound as offensive as it just did, but all of this basically involves me allowing me having to justify my existence. And hardly any other group of people is asked to do that as frequently as trans people are. I mean, that's part of raising awareness and making sure that people understand is we have as much right to be here and be in public and interact with society as anybody else does. And if
Well,
that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my fault. I'm just living my life.
well, just like there's people who don't believe in Islam, don't believe in Christianity, don't believe in a lot of things. There's people who simply don't believe in the things you're talking about. That there is such a thing as trans kids, and they believe strictly in biology, and that XX and XY is what determines things. And as you said, you are a biological male, and I understand everything else you're saying though. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here is that no matter what you say or do or how many children's books there are, there's women whose it's simply going to be their instinct that they're going to be uncomfortable when they see a biological male enter into a private space with them, especially if they're alone. And I just, I appreciate your perspective on, where do you fit into that? I mean, is there kind of explain why it's not an option to use to do exactly what Officer Weaver said, to use one of the other restrooms where there's no females.
Okay. I don't know what the purpose, I don't know what you think the purpose of this interview is, and I don't know how many times I can say to you that it is not my job to justify my existence, not to you, not to anyone. And if you're just going to ask me the same things over and over again and not accept any of my answers, then I'm going to have to say that this interview is over. The fear that, these mothers have. Well, there's also a genuine fear, there's also a genuine fear that all trans women live with. I'm sure you know the stories of all the trans women, that have been murdered and the hate crimes, against trans women. So I think, a few seconds of people, I mean, I'm sorry it has to happen to anyone, but I think a few seconds of somebody being uncomfortable in the restroom pales in comparison, to what has been done to some, as to what has been done to some trans women.